The UK is under attack, a full-scale attack by none other than Elon Musk. He has gone wild, attacking the Prime Minister of the UK, attacking government officials, now attacking lots of MPs online who are the members of parliament. In this video, I want to go over why this is happening, why Elon Musk is focusing on the UK and the UK government. And I want to also discuss the facts around what has been brought up, which is the British Pakistani grooming gangs. There's a lot of data being shared that is inaccurate. And I think it's good that we're having this conversation, but I think we need to have it based on facts. And, the main aim of our show is having honest conversations based on truth, no matter where the truth leads us. So in this video, we're going to go over those facts and give you the background to what is actually happening and why it's happening right now. Before I go into the background, I just want to show you what Elon is posting online. His pinned post on X is America should liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government. He really is hating the UK government at the moment. He is sharing the list of MPs who voted against deporting foreign rapists. These people are evil and need arresting. It's a good question to why people would vote on deporting foreign rapists. He's been sharing a lot of things regarding Tommy Robinson, who is, for many, considered a far-right individual who spoke about a lot of these grooming gangs, which we're going to go into in more detail. But he's been attacking the Prime Minister heavily, and the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, has had to respond to say that a lot of the stuff that Elon Musk is sharing is misinformation. Elon Musk has asked that some of the MPs be jailed, and he named them because of their actions, which we're going to go into. Here he shared that Labour is the government, UK government, blocks child rape gang inquiry to hide its shameful past. Is there a shameful past? So very quickly, what is the background to this? In the UK, there has been a grooming gang scandal that occurred back decades ago. The scandal was in relation to grooming gangs abusing children, and the authorities did not take the adequate action regarding those abuses. They failed at the victims, and it seems like the victims were reporting these crimes to the police, to other members of the government, but the governments were either very slow, did not care, thought there was not enough evidence, and did not follow up on those things. So those victims kept on getting abused. And it's, an awful story that's happened in many different cities in the UK. Now, what it turns out to be, which makes the scandal even bigger than it is that a lot of these offenders that were taking those actions against those victims were from British Pakistani ethnicity. That's not to say the majority of grooming gangs are from there, and I'm going to go into that. But what the inquiries and investigations showed is that a lot of the failures that occurred in terms of the police actually finding who the offenders are and prosecuting them were in relation to, in the majority of cases, those members that come from British Pakistani origins. And the conclusion was that the reason that was the case was because apparently they didn't want to kind of create community division by stating or by showcasing that those members were actually committing those crimes. There was an outcry about this. This is not a new thing. There were many investigations and inquiries after those failures that detailed what the failures were, what are the recommendations of what we need to do. And these inquiries occurred for many different cities, such as Rochdale and Oxford, Peterborough. And there was even a national inquiry into this that clearly showed there were many failures, that the government failed the victims. And the issue is that during those periods where the victims were coming to the police, but the police weren't responding appropriately, the lead prosecutor over the country was Keir Starmer at that time, who is the Prime Minister of the UK. And that's why Elon Musk is going heavily on Keir Starmer, because he thinks that he tried to push it down and not prosecute enough people because he didn't want to showcase that some British Pakistani men were doing this, because the right might have kind of reasonably got angry and started to attack them and taking things in their own hand. And so it seems like a lot of cases were quieted down or not even responded to. Now, why did this come about now? Because this has been investigated, and we know about these failures through these inquiries and these police operations that occurred afterwards. The reason why this came up now is because Oldham, which was one of the cities in the UK, requested the government do a national inquiry, but the government rejected that because it said, we kind of already did a national inquiry a couple of years back, and all of the cities did their own inquiry, so you should, Oldham as the council, should do their own inquiry into your city instead of it being a government-led national inquiry. And so a lot of people said, why is the government rejecting this inquiry? Is the government trying to hide something? And Tommy Robinson, his focus, he has been very much on those grooming gangs. And as you can understand, people were furious because even fathers of those victims were going to the police, but the police somehow were not trying to make this a public thing. And this is, people say this is where political correctness got wrong, where there was kind of two types of policing regarding white offenders versus Asian offenders, which is obviously incorrect, shouldn't have happened. So obviously a lot of people are furious. This is the reason why it's come up now, because of this Oldham case that the government just rejected in terms of Oldham should do its own investigation and inquiry. And since then, there has been a lot of research about, wait, hang on, how many of those grooming gangs are actually carried out by British Pakistani men? Let's see the figures that are being shared. When you look online, you see this figure a lot, 84%. So this headline says, British Pakistani researchers say 84% of grooming gang members are Asian. And this is from the Quilliams report. Obviously, this is frightening that if that's true, 84% is Asian. That's crazy. Others, so there's this figure, 84%, and then there's this other figure, which is 80%. What are the ethnic backgrounds of Britain's gang rapists? And this is the data from these operations, which I'm going to describe why this is important. 80% found that it's Pakistani. Bangladesh was 3.6%, other Asian 12.7%, and white British was 3.6%. So you're seeing two figures here, 84% and 80%. And when I looked into this, because this is a very high number, I found this table where we can see that this is a table, offenders, ethnicity, and heritage, which this graph comes from that table. This is table 2.1, source Cockbain 2018. And these are the operations that are actually detailed over here. These are police operations on the top over there. And it showcases from these operations how many people were involved that of each ethnicity. And so according to all these cases, 44 were Asian Pakistani out of a total sample of 55 regarding the number of offenders involved or looked at by these cases. And over here it says, Cockbain says, she says, I cannot offer a clear and definitive explanation as to why there were so many Asian offenders on these 6 cases, and I am loath to speculate beyond the data. Now, a lot of people are using this to say it's 80% of grooming gangs are Asian Pakistani. But again, this is regarding 6 cases with a sample of 55 offenders. Obviously, this is not the general UK population, as in the general UK grooming gang sample. This is only 6 cases involving 55 people. There were a lot more than 55 people involved in grooming gangs. Let me tell you that. So I looked at these operations. These police operations were specifically focusing on these situations where there were failures by the government around Asian grooming gangs. So those cases, those police operations were actually looking at Asian grooming gangs. So obviously, a big portion of them will be Asian individuals. And also, it's not the general population. Now, Cockbain, I looked into her research. Here she's referring to the Quilliam report, which showcases the 84%. Stereotypes of Muslim rape gangs were greatly boosted by the Quilliam Foundation's Grooming Gangs report. Source of the spurious but ubiquitous claim that 84% of grooming gang offenders are Asian. Although framed as academic and evidence-based, the report is shoddy pseudoscience its conclusion that the overrepresentation of Asian ethnicity, predominantly British Pakistani origin individuals, is conclusively irrefutable, that conclusion is deeply misleading. The report in no way delivers on its pretense of comprehensive data analysis of all group child sex offenses committed in the United Kingdom over a period of 12 years. This report looked at only 264 offenders over 12 years. There were much more than 264 offenders. It's nowhere near that sample. Telling the keyword comprehensive was later deleted amid furtive corrections to the published report. When challenged, staff outright lied and continued to meet valid criticisms with personal attacks. The supposedly specific crime profile under investigation is actually confused, inconsistent, and incoherent. Over here it says somehow, in a way impossible to verify, the 264 offenders were identified across 12 weeks. The data source remains unspecified, but was likely media reports, seemingly cherry-picked to definitively demonstrate a predetermined disproportionality. What they're saying is that it seems like they chose cases that had high percentages of Asian, British, Pakistani individuals to ensure that it's a high figure. So that's the 84% coming from there. But let's not just, go on challenges of those reports. Let's look at the actual data. When it comes to the proportion of defendants proceeded against for child sex abuse offenses and the general population, so grooming gangs is a subset of the child sexual abuse. We don't have data on ethnicity per grooming gangs because it's quite a specific thing. We have data, the closest data we have is the child sex abuse offenses. The offense defendants proceeded against for child sexual abuse offenses in 2022, 88% was white, 83% was white British, and the population in England and Wales aged 10 plus in 2021 that are white British is 75%. Asian is 7% of defendants proceeded against for child sexual abuse offenses in 2022, and the general population was 9%. When you look at Pakistani, it's 2%, where they committed offenses, and the population that are 10 plus is 2%. Black is 3%, and the general population is 4%. And mixed is 2 and 2%. So there isn't actually an overrepresentation when it comes to child sexual abuse, other than white British. But there's two arguments to this. People say, one, we're not talking about grooming gangs over here. Yes, grooming gangs is a specific thing, but child sexual abuse should showcase that. If there is if 84% of grooming gangs were committed by Asian Pakistani, then these numbers would be much higher. Now, the other argument is, well, the issue isn't that they committed these, not only did they commit these crimes, is that they weren't arrested for it. And that's the issue that a lot of people had, which is a valid issue. They weren't, many of them were not arrested when they committed those crimes. But in a lot of cities, they carried out these inquiries and investigations, which led to hundreds of convictions of people who weren't convicted before. They didn't get arrested, but got arrested after those inquiries and those investigations occurred. Now, do I think that everyone involved has been arrested? No, I don't think so. In the same way, a lot of the celebrities that committed child abuses, BBC, I'm sure there's many that have not been arrested. In the way that I think a lot of, the church is known for their child abuses. A lot of the church pastors, I'm sure, hasn't been arrested because it's the same thing. There's a lot of investigations into the church and how the church tries to hush it down, and the community doesn't really report it because it's a relationship with the church, and the police also kind of hush it down because it's a religious thing. So that occurs in other faiths and in other segments. And we saw that also with Jimmy Savile, who was a white British who abused hundreds and hundreds of children. Of course, for the church, it was millions of children, but for Jimmy Savile, it was hundreds. And there was many failures by the police and by the government to take action because of that cozy relationship they had with these BBC presenters. So there seems to be huge failures, which we need to talk about. We have carried out inquiries and investigations. There are some cities that haven't seen inquiries and investigations, and we need to have those inquiries and investigations. Let me go through another data with you. These are the number of persons arrested for notifiable sexual offenses by ethnic groups. So this is a subset above child sex abuses. This is general sex offenses. So that includes child abuses, includes grooming, but this data is from 2012 to 2018 in England and Wales. If you look at the 17 to 18 figures that were available, 71% of the arrests were white, 9.3% of the arrests were black, 9% were Asian, 2.4% mixed, and 2.1% were Chinese or other regarding the arrest. When you look at the general population per the 21 census, it's 74% white, so the arrests are underrepresented. Blacks, where the general population is 4% when the arrests were 9%, so it's nearly double, more than double. For Asians, it's 8.5%, and the arrest is 9%, so it is slightly overrepresented. And when you see kind of the Asian British, it's kind of similar to those figures. In 2013-14, it's higher. So there is an overrepresentation. Now, the caveat to this is that this table excludes Lancashire, who were unable to provide arrest data in the year ending March 2018. And so a lot of the scandals happened in Lancashire. So this number will increase regarding Asians once the Lancashire data is incorporated, which is available. But even when we look at kind of that, this includes the Lancashire, and this is the defendants. When we include the Lancashire data, it's still Asians are not overrepresented. In fact, they're underrepresented when it comes to specifically child sexual abuse offenses, which is closer to the grooming gangs than the general sexual offenses, because grooming gangs is included in the grooming gang offenses included in child sexual abuse. So to summarize, obviously there has been a huge problem with this. You know, I'm a father. I can not even imagine how I would feel if this happened to my young. I would obviously be furious. I would be angry. I would demand justice, and we should all be demanding justice. However, we need to base this conversation on facts, and I just presented the facts to you. There are a lot of child abuses that occur in the UK, and I just showed you the statistics. You know, the Asian community isn't overrepresented in child abuses. However, saying that, there is failures by the government. It's very clear. For a lot of it, there has been investigations and inquiries. Now, I cannot say that I trust the inquiries fully, or that, not that I don't trust inquiries, but I don't believe that everyone involved was actually caught or brought to justice, whether that is from the crimes that they committed or from the people that actually hid the truth from the government during those periods where Labour was in government. And the issue that a lot of people have now is they mistrust the government, because, especially the Labour government and Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer was the lead prosecutor during those events. He kind of was in charge of the prosecution that involved sexual abuses, and there seems to be failures there. It's very hard to know his involvement in this because it's not clear. And therefore, when you ask me whether we think we should have a national inquiry on this, a part of me says that we've already had a national inquiry a couple of years back, and it was showcased where the failures were. The issue is we haven't actually made enough changes, I believe, regarding this. And this doesn't just apply to, because a lot of the failures that were discussed is around, British Pakistani grooming gangs, but obviously these failures occurred in other places, in celebrity places. As I said, the church is known for their abuses of millions of children, not just in the UK, but everywhere. And so there's a lot of failures that have occurred, and all of it should be investigated. The issue is a lot of people, instead of focusing on kind of bringing the truth and making sure that the victims are safeguarded, and the people that took those absolutely disgusting actions, which when you read about it is just horrible, absolutely horrible. It's heartbreaking to hear what they did. All of those people should be brought to justice. So a part of me says maybe a national inquiry, even though we haven't actually applied the recommendations of the previous inquiries, there should be a national inquiry that looks at also other people that were involved in this when it comes to the government. And I'm sure a lot of cities haven't had their inquiries, and therefore those cities themselves should have their inquiries to find the truth and bring everyone, hold everyone accountable and bring justice. Now, if you are a person who is triggered more by the race than the crime, i.e. if a white British person commits that crime, you feel differently than if a non-white British person commits that crime, then there's a problem there, that the race is more of a problem than the crime for you. If you're getting triggered by the race of the crime, that is an issue. But also I can understand why people are furious in terms of the government hiding those crimes when it comes to particular races. But is there white grooming gangs? Of course there is. Do white British people carry out these activities in the same way other races do? Everyone's involved. Is there an overrepresentation? Well, the facts that we look at, that we have in our hands, shows that there isn't really an overrepresentation when it comes to child abuses. How accurate that data is another question, but it shouldn't be. I'm sure there's errors there and there's data that's missing, but that would include all parts, celebrities, other religious members, other races, including the Asian ethnicity. Um, Let me know what you think about this. If you like this analysis, do hit the like button and subscribe or follow. Thank you very much.